Hello all. So today we're talking about managing and leading in sport and leisure organizations. This is chapter 5. So this chapter introduces and examines the roles that individuals play within sport organizations and leisure organizations. Thus, this chapter is about organizational behavior, which is the study of individuals and groups in organizations. According to Schimmerhorn, Hunt, and Osborne, organizational behavior is a multidisciplinary field devoted to understanding individual and group behavior, interpersonal processes, and organization dynamics. This chapter addresses many topics related to people in the sport management workplace. First, management functions and skills are introduced. These are followed by an examination of leadership and leaders relative to the skills of the sports manager, his or her followers, and the sport context. Then the concepts of decision-making, authority, and power are explained. A conceptual model of leadership development, including the individual, group, and organizational level factors that influence leaders, is explained next. This chapter concludes with the discussion of diversity and the value that needs to be placed on diversity in sport organizations. Commentary regarding ethics in the sport workplace and the relevance of critical thinking in management and leading people in sport organizations. The success of sport organizations ultimately depends on how effectively managers apply their management and leadership skills. Hersey, Blanchard, and Johnson in 2008 provided one of the most comprehensive definitions of management as the process of working with and through individuals and groups and other resources such as equipment, capital, and technology to accomplish organizational goals. Numerous theoretical approaches to management and managing people and organizations have been developed. We classify these approaches into 3 basic types: scientific management, human relations management, and the process approach, also known as administrative management. In the following paragraphs, we summarize these approaches. Early theorists believed that the primary responsibility of managers was to increase workers' output. Frederick Taylor in 1911 developed this approach in which the major concern was to scrutinize the performance of individual workers. The key was that workers who produced more than others would receive greater reward. This approach advocated paying people by the number of units produced or sold rather than by the length of time or hours that they worked. In the sport industry, this approach is best illustrated when employees work on a commission basis. For example, a game day salesperson might earn a commission based on the number of programs sold, and the sport manager would focus on how effective the salespeople are. The scientific management approach considers paying and working conditions to be the most important factors and increasing a worker's performance. The human relations approach grew out of studies conducted at Western Electric's Hawthorne, Illinois plant during the late 1920s and early 1930s. Mayo's research on more than 20,000 employees found that when employees believed they were important, they became more cohesive and productive. The researchers' conclusion was that managers' concern for workers would lead to higher rates of job satisfaction, which would result in better performance and higher productivity. The process approach has been the predominant theoretical framework used in the study and practice of management in recent times. Unlike the scientific and human relations management approaches, the process approach focuses on managing the organization as an entity. Using that process management approach, we review various management functions assumed by managers. The process approach to management uses a set of ongoing interactive activities known as the underlying processes of management to accomplish the goals and objectives of organizations, departments, or work units. Such processes were first introduced more than 6 decades ago as Pos decorum by Gulick and Erwick in 1937. POS decorum is the acronym for planning, organization, staffing, directing, coordinating, reporting, and budgeting. The The original 7 processes have since been reduced to 5 functions: planning, staffing, organizing, directing, and controlling, and evaluating. By Jones and George in 2009. Figure 5.1 illustrates that these underlying processes, the functions of management, flow in all directions, and decisions made in each component affect all other components. Ultimately, all the processes revolve around the manager's actions and decisions. In sport organizations, the management process typically starts with planning and ends with controlling and evaluating. Managers might engage in the activities in various sequences, and sometimes they perform several activities simultaneously as they carry out the responsibilities of their jobs. The element common to all the processes whenever they are performed is decision making. Table 5.1 provides a definition of each function as well as examples of how the general manager of a private sport club might practice them. The concepts of decision-making, authority, and power are covered later in this chapter. We now proceed to a discussion of the classifications of managers. So here you'll see that much of the management process of a general manager in a sport organization, these are some of the definitions of managerial functions, and there are examples of how a sport manager practices them. So planning, developing and implementing goals, objectives, strategies, procedures, and policies and rules to produce goods and services in the most effective and efficient manner. An example of this is the general manager of a private sport club predicts the increase in enrollment at the start of the new year and arranges for the facility to be open 18 hours per day instead of 15 hours per day. Or staffing, the recruiting and selecting, orienting, training, and developing and replacing employees to produce goods and services in the most effective and efficient manner. So an example of this would be the general manager advertises positions, 3 teaching pros, 1 maintenance person, and 1 administrative assistant. And the general manager then holds interviews, checks references, makes job offers, and selects the staff needed for the golf program. In organizing, you're arranging resources, whether that's human, financial, equipment, supplies, time, space, or information, to produce goods and services in the most effective and efficient manner. So after conducting an assessment, the general manager establishes a work unit for teaching golf at the club. The general manager appoints a full-time coordinator who will coordinate 3 teaching pros and a new golf course with an adequate budget. Directing as influencing members, subordinates, peers, supervisors as individuals and as groups to produce goods and services in the most effective and efficient manner. The general manager encourages the golf teaching pros to prepare weekend course packages for local executives who have expressed an interest in learning golf skills. Or controlling and evaluating. Evaluating whether the employees are on task and making progress toward achieving the goals and adhering to the guidelines and standards for producing goods and services in the most effective and efficient manner. After 3 months, the general manager monitors the progress of the new golf program with the pros and discusses ways to make the program more attractive and potential to new members, such as with speed golf, making it where it's a little faster and play, and also getting some cardio work involved with it as well. Although all managers have formal authority for organizing, directing, and controlling the work activities of others, they possess different degrees of authority. In the hierarchy of an organization, managers are usually classified as top level, middle, or supervisory level. Top level managers, the number of managers in this group is typically small. Also known as executive or senior level managers, they have the most power and authority. They are usually responsible for the entire organization or a major part of it. Middle managers, on the other hand, are also known as administrative level managers. These people are usually selected by top level managers. They are therefore accountable to top level managers and responsible for the employees who are below them in the hierarchy. The managers at the middle level are generally responsible for managing a department or unit that performs an organizational function and ensures that the assigned tasks are done efficiently. To their subordinates, middle-level managers are the sources of information and are problem solvers because they know the technical side of the products and services. Middle-level managers are unique because they must both be leaders and followers. They are connected to supervisors and to subordinates. After conducting an assessment, the general manager establishes a work unit for teaching golf at the club. The general manager appoints a full-time coordinator who will coordinate 3 teaching pros and a new golf course within an adequate budget. The general manager also encourages the golf teaching pros to prepare weekend course packages for local executives who have expressed an interest in learning golf skills. Then after 3 months, that general manager monitors progress of the new golf program with the pros and discusses ways to make the program more attractive to potential new members. And then supervisory level managers. These managers are also known as first line managers or supervisors. They report to middle level managers and are responsible for the employees who work in their units. The employees for whom these managers are responsible for can be classified as operatives or technical specialists. Supervisory managers have the least amount of authority. They are primarily responsible for a single area in a work unit, division, or department in which they supervise the work of the operatives or technical specialists. Their duties are to communicate with, inspire, and influence their subordinates to get the job done in the most effective and efficient way. Supervisory managers represent the contact point between the technical specialists and middle-level managers. Managers at all levels possess certain skills that aid in the performance of their day-to-day tasks. As noted by Katz in 1974, the skill sets of effective administrators can be broken down into 3 categories: conceptual skills, human relations skills, and technical skills. Interestingly, the amount of each skill required by a manager may change from organization to organization and may fluctuate with the level of management. Further, managerial skills do not function in isolation. Most managers display multiple managerial skills at any given time. A summary of the link between each managerial skill category and the levels of management for the USOC, or the U.S. Olympic Committee, is provided in Table 5.3, which you see here. A manager's conceptual skills help to identify the root cause of problems rather than simply stating the symptoms of an issue. For instance, to redirect an unmotivated corporate culture, the CEO of the USOC may use his or her human relations skills to communicate with each of the chief officers to develop an understanding of the factors that influence the USOC's corporate culture. Rather than diagnose and label the systems of poor productivity or low morale of the issue, the CEO will use his or her conceptual skills to see the big picture and create solutions for the betterment of the UCSO as a whole. A manager's human relations skills help in leading, motivating, and developing cohesion among employees. Within sport organizations, managers at all levels must work with a variety of employees, including paid staff, volunteers, and interns. Thus, effective human relations skills are an essential component to the daily operations of sport managers. A manager's technical skills are directly related with everyday tasks on the job. For instance, the Chief Financial Officer or CFO of the USOC must possess technical skills associated with budget management, management of internal and external audits, and financial planning. Kane in 2014 defined leadership as an influence relationship aimed at moving organizations or groups of people toward an imagined future that depends upon alignment of values and establishment of mutual purposes. Hersey and colleagues have defined management as working with individuals and groups while using other resources of time, money, equipment, and facilities to achieve the goals of an organization. The roles of leaders and managers have both similarities and differences. For example, both roles involve people working with other people. The roles are different with respect to ways in which leaders and managers accomplish the objectives. Managers are often leaders, but not all leaders are necessarily managers. The term leader is broader than the term manager because people need not be in management positions to be leaders. Depending on the situation, all employees of the organization can act as leaders. Anytime a person influences the behavior of others, regardless of the reason, that person is demonstrating leadership. For example, a sport management intern might have special skills using a computer software program to create complex video presentations. When that intern assists the controller or director, she or he is taking the lead during that time. Conversely, when employees in an organization rely on others for direction or guidance, those others are acting as leaders even if they are not in official decision-making positions. As dynamic and often complex structures, organizations in the sport industry require managers who are skilled in both management and leadership. Like management, leadership is also conceptualized as an interactive process. The primary goal of leadership is to exert influence on individual and group behaviors towards the leader's goals. The organization's goals, or both. Although the terms manager and leader are sometimes used interchangeably, the two concepts are not the same. When people function as managers, they are primarily focused on efficiency and doing things right. When people function as leaders, they are concerned with effectiveness and doing things right. Differences between management and leadership are further elaborated in Table 5.4, which you see here, which shows the managers cope with complexity in the workplace and that leaders cope with change. Based on the distinction between managers and leaders, it is important for sport leaders to recognize the characteristics of effective leaders and determine which characteristics are present or can be developed within the human resources of their sport entity. Greenleaf in 2002 indicated that servant leadership may be the most effective form of leadership in today's society. The servant leader is a servant first. Servant leadership begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve. The best test is, do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to be servants? Then conscious choice brings one to inspire to serve. According to Cheladurai and Kerwin in 2017, sport organizations may provide a unique context for servant leaders to flourish because many leaders enter the sport industry to serve and enrich the lives of athletes. And you'll see here in Table 5.5, it outlines the characteristics of successful servant leaders. I'll let you kind of go through those on your own. As noted previously, leaders differ from managers in their ability to cope with change. When dealing with change, it's important for sport leaders to examine themselves, their followers, and the leadership context. Specifically, Fiedler's in 1963 contingency theory of leadership can suggest that most effective style of leadership is dependent on the situation or the context. And this theory, leadership is multidimensional and that it includes the leader's traits, the power or influence and goals, their followers' expectations and values, and the leadership context defined by organizational complexity and task uncertainty. The following subsections provide details for each of these elements of the contingency leader theory of leadership. And Figure 5.2 illustrates the connection between each element and highlights the interaction that occurs between them during the leadership process. Over the years, several approaches to the study of leadership have been developed. Among the most common approaches are theories that attempt to explain why some people are good leaders and others are not, and models that represent observed patterns of effective leadership that can be learned. Leadership approaches have identified specific traits and characteristics held by leaders, such as honesty, integrity, self-confidence, and cognitive abilities. Behaviors assumed by leaders, such as behaviors centered on tasks, behaviors centered on employees, or behaviors centered on both task and employees, and leadership based on situations, as we discussed in the previous section, where different situations call for different leadership styles. The following paragraphs focus on specific leadership behaviors outlined in the full range of leadership model. This model includes transactional leadership, laissez-faire, and transformational leadership behaviors. As you progress in your sport management curriculum and study leadership in more depth, you will discover additional leadership theories and models. For a full review of leadership and sport management, you will also learn that some leader behaviors overlap categories and define neat classifications. Nonetheless, a brief discussion of this model will provide you with a basic understanding of current thought leadership in organizations. Following a review of 40 years of leadership research in sport management, Welty, Peachy, and colleagues proposed a multi-level conceptual model seen here in Figure 5.3 to enhance understanding of leadership in sport organization with a focus on leadership as a multi-level or person, dyad, group, or collective leader-follower interaction process that occurs in a particular situation or context where a leader, such as a supervisor or superior, and followers, which are subordinates or direct reports, share a purpose, a vision, a mission, and jointly accomplish things such as goals, objectives, and tasks willingly without coercion. Within their proposed model, Welty, Peachy, and colleagues examine how leadership may have an influence and operate differently in the context of sport. As an example, when describing individual characteristics that have an influence on a leader, this model includes consideration of a leader's experiences as a participant in sport and how this may affect the development of his or her leadership skills. These sport participation experiences influence the lived experience of the leader at the individual leader of the leadership process. At the group level, coaches and athletes also influence the leadership process. Finally, at the organization and collective level, fans and alumni, governance by leagues such as the MLS or NCAA, and organizational culture influence the leadership process in sport organizations. The multi-level conceptual model of leadership in sport organization has yet to be evaluated, but by presenting this work, Welty, Peachy, and colleagues hope scholars in the field will begin to examine the proposed relationships to contribute to a better understanding of the leadership process in sport management. Decision making involves a series of steps. Although researchers may disagree on the number of steps, they agree on the essence of these steps. For the purposes of our discussion, we present the following 6 steps. Defining or framing the problem. What is the problem or issue that requires a decision? Does the manager fully understand all that is involved in addressing the problem? For example, if an organization is going through a change process or rebranding, managers must be able to explain the need for change to employees. Number 2, identify criteria for decision. What criteria must be considered before making the decision? For example, is time of the essence in making rebranding decisions? Has there been a resistance to change by personnel in the past? Are other stakeholders involved in this process? Board of directors, international committees, sponsors, and participants. How can rebranding increase participant or consumer awareness of the organization? Developing and evaluating alternatives. For every problem or issue, various alternatives may be available. Alternatives include adjusting the mission of the organization, answering questions regarding which logos and visual designs should represent the rebranding initiatives. Should an adjustment or realignment of organizational values be made? Number 4, selecting an alternative. Which alternative will be selected? which alternative best responds to the problem identified in step 1 and the criteria identified in step 2. The decision is made at this step. Number 5, implementing the alternative. This step involves implementing the decision selected in step 4. Determining who needs to be involved in implementing the decision and how this decision can best be implemented must be established during this stage. And finally, number 6, evaluating the effectiveness of the decision. Did the decision lead to the intended outcomes? Was it the right decision? Was it the best decision given the circumstances? Is the public aware of the rebranding and are stakeholders happy with the rebranding? Legitimate or positional power is the first source of making a decision. This source of power comes from the leadership or management position that a person holds in the hierarchy, the top level, middle, or supervisory level manager. Managers hold a legitimate source of power, and as long as they occupy the position, furthermore, they have power only in the organization in which they hold a senior position. As noted with the contingency theory of leadership, power is an important element when assessing the effectiveness of leadership and coping with change. Power is sometimes defined as the ability to influence others. It has also been defined as control over resources. Individuals within organizations may have power from various sources, ranging from the organizational to the personal. Among the organizational sources, we find legitimate power, reward power, and coercive power. Among the personal sources of power, we find reverent, expert, and informational power. In the following paragraphs, we review these sources of power, starting with organizational sources. Another organizational source of power is reward power. For this source, the person in the organization who provides rewards to employees has power. In most cases, an individual with legitimate power may also have reward power. Examples of rewards include increased wages, performance bonuses, promotions, desirable assignments, and training opportunities. Rewards need to be considered valuable by others for the person who gives them to have power. Coercive power is another source of power. The person in the organization who provides sanctions and punishments or threats to employees have power. Reprimands, demotions, and decreased access to resources are examples of sanctions and punishments. This source of power is often perceived as problematic because it operates in the negative sphere. As in the case of reward power, this form of power is also often tied to legitimate forms of power. Let's now review the personal sources of power, starting with reverent power. This source of power stems from charisma and appeal. Reverent power is based on people's perception of the person with power because of personality characteristics, respect, and admiration. The person with power does not have to do anything to deserve it. Note that this source of power can be abused. For example, someone who is charming and likable but lacks integrity and honesty may rise to power and then use it for evil. Another source of personal power is expert power. This source is based on knowledge and skills that are received as valuable in a situation. Generally, people are willing to listen to the advice and judgment of an expert. The ideas of an expert are often considered more valuable than the opinions of people with legitimate power. The last source of power, which was subsequently added to the original list by French and Raven in 1959, involves information. Although this source of power is along the same lines as expert power, the difference is that the person with the power has access to information, not necessarily expertise. Access to this information may be a result of the position held in the organization. For example, the support staff of organizational leaders may be privy to valuable information, such as promotions, demotions, terminations, and budget cuts. Office location may be another circumstance in which a person can have access to information. by overhearing information that may be considered valuable. Relationships with other people in the organization may be another. Leaders and managers of sport organizations are working with an increasingly diverse workforce. It is an outdated view to assume that the existence of diversity in the workplace is not important. A diverse workforce is more representative of the public and can better respond to consumers' needs and can provide consumers with better goods and services. Diversity can also improve organizational effectiveness by improving managerial decision making. Diversity, therefore, is an important resource for organizations. Diversity is defined by Cunningham in 2015 as the presence of socially meaningful differences among members of a dyad or a group. Diversity can be understood at the surface and at a deeper level. Surface level diversity can represent variations in gender, age, race, and ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and ability. Deep level diversity includes variations in individuals' values and beliefs, experiences, and expectations. Interaction is required to discover deep level differences. These differences include those based on knowledge and information, functional training, and tenure in an organization. Deep level diversity is often the result of differing levels of education or different work-related experiences. Managers need to value diversity by first creating awareness of acknowledging and accepting the benefits of diversity, accommodating surface level differences, and activating, proactively and effectively managing deep level diversity. Managing diversity in organizations can be challenging when organizational leaders have not created a culture in which diversity is accepted as valuable and normal organizational functioning. Matten and Hernandez noted that the organizational culture was among the challenges associated with the successful implementation of diversity initiatives. Organizational culture was also tied to the difficulty that some organizations had in generating buy-in from current employees and middle managers. Specifically, it is increasingly important to develop a culture of diversity to embrace diversity in the sport workplace. For example, people who work within a culture of similarity tend to expect that their colleagues will behave in a similar fashion and possess similar values. Alternatively, a culture of diversity is one in which individual differences are considered strengths and unique values that are appreciated. Cunningham in 2015 suggested that a culture of diversity can be embraced by leaders using several strategies. For instance, a proactive management tactic, such as orientation and training, could be introduced to promote core departmental values on embracing the functionality of diverse values. To better understand best practices that organizations adopt to support inclusion, it is imperative for managers and leaders to assess the degree to which employees are free to express their individuated self and have a sense of workplace connectedness and belongingness. Melting and Cunningham studied intercollegiate athletic departments that have been recognized for the inclusion of LGBTQ athletes, coaches, and administrators. They identified multi-level, micro, meso, and macro factors that influence organizational inclusiveness. Figure 5.4 that you saw in the slide before provides an overview of the factors at each level. Melton and Cunningham highlight that factors such as culture of sport at the macro level, organizational culture at the meso, and contact with the LGBTQ community at the micro level influence attitudinal support for LGBTQ inclusion, which then influences behavioral support for LGBTQ inclusion. The relationship between attitude and behavioral support is outlined. Presence of change of teams. The NCAA athletic directors need to proactively, these are some keys to support inclusive diversity practices. So the presence of change of teams. The NCAA athletic directors need to proactively establish teams of staff members who have a strong appreciation for the need for diversity and are committed to creating a culture of diversity in the department. Individuals on the change team must be committed to communicating the need for diversity to other staff and volunteers within the department. Education. Athletic directors and associate ADs need to proactively educate their staff on what diversity efforts mean to personnel. For example, memorandums, leader speeches, seminars, and training can be provided to answer questions related to how change will affect organizational functioning. Individuals may feel threatened by change and must be educated to why the change is happening, how it's happening, and the effects of shifting to a culture of diversity. Top management support. ADs and associate athletic directors must be good examples to their employees. According to social learning theory by Bandura in 1977, employees will learn from observing the people around them. Thus, the most influential managers within the department must accept and communicate the value of diversity in words and actions. Systemic integration. ADs must begin to integrate the value of diversity into their policies, program, and practices. For example, the mission, vision, and goals of the department should include an emphasis on diversity, and diversity should be evaluated in performance evaluations and appraisals, acknowledged as meaningful to employee behavior. When educating personnel, it's important to address why sport organization needs to improve their organizational diversity. In addition to best supporting diverse fans and participants, work in sport organizations continues to evolve, and leaders must respond to changes in the workplace. Sport organizations are evolving to better support a more service-based economy. A service-based economy, which results in direct interaction between employees and the customers they serve, relies on high-quality relationships between customers and employees. In one study, customers who believed they were interacting with people who were different from them experienced less satisfaction in the interaction. Therefore, a workforce that reflects the many different types of customers a sport organization supports could result in more positive customer service experiences. The ways that employees work are also changing. Sport and non-sport organizations now use more team-based approaches to tackle projects and tasks. Organizations that support a diverse workforce are better positioned to help individuals work in teams, develop different ideas, experiences, and perspectives. There are also increasing mergers and acquisitions occurring within the sport industry that involve global companies. These result in employees working with and for diverse individuals. Sport organizations that foster an inclusive work environment will respond best to mergers and acquisitions, and that inclusive environments will be proactively managed to welcome diverse perspectives that arise from a merger. Further, at the local level, mergers between sport organizations can offer the inclusion of diverse perspectives and better serve the needs of diverse customers. In the United States, civil rights legislation mandates protection against discrimination based on race, gender, age, sex, physical ability, and religion. U.S. states have laws that may go further to protect individuals from discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. These legal mandates affect diversity and how it is managed within the sport organization. Title IX is an important piece of U.S. legislation that has helped increase the number of girls and women participating in sport and has been used to protect individuals in cases of discrimination, notably sexual harassment and sexual assault on college campuses. Social pressures have also contributed to an increased awareness of the need for a diverse workforce. LabCheck collected extensive data on the racial and gender representations of employees in major professional sport organizations in the United States and internationally, and in U.S. intercollegiate sports. As introduced in Chapter 1, critical thinking skills are important for the management of human resources in the sport industry. Leaders and managers should base their decisions and actions on rational, factual, and objective information. Caring about others and considering their opinions, concerns, and interests are important elements for the critical thinker. Steps discussed in decision making and the management of human resources in the workplace offer good strategies to ensure a systematic evaluation of alternatives based on objective criteria to enhance the well-being of employees and the workplace and to attain the objectives of the organization. When dealing with issues of diversity, ethics, and decision-making, managers must reflect on the issues that individuals in their organizations must face and recognize the way the world or organization operates. Managers must then take an active and educated role in addressing and discussing these issues. Critical thinking ensures sound reasoning about appropriate decisions and behaviors surrounding the most important resources in any organization, the people. Employees, managers, and leaders are expected to act ethically as they undertake their duties and responsibilities within the sport organization. Unfortunately, as many incidents in the recent past have demonstrated, people and organizations do not always act ethically. And a study on ethical decision-making and practical morality for compliance officers of U.S. university and athletic departments, KIL, in 2007, demonstrated that these sport leaders drew from various sources to make ethical decisions. The sources included in their personal moral codes, professional codes of conduct, and their organization's standards, rules, and procedures. Decisions made often involved a manager's ability to balance these three sources. To illustrate the challenges of decision making, a modified version of the scenario presented by KIL is detailed here. It was a scenario involving the International Basketball Federation, or FIBA, and its decisions related to an under-18 World Basketball game. Because of agreements with organizational sponsors and the television company broadcasting the game, the leaders of FIBA wanted to abide by their policy to plan a game time optimal for reaching the largest audience. Therefore, the leaders decided to go with an 11 p.m. local start for the final contest of the tournament. Besides adhering to the prior television and sponsorship agreements, a late start produced the most potential global viewers for the television broadcast. An increase in potential viewership would provide the opportunity for the organization and its stakeholders to reap the economic benefit, increased revenue through ad sales. But the coaches and leaders of the teams involved believed that the late start could negatively affect the players' performance. Thus, they disagreed with the organizational policy. This scenario, which is frequently played out in the sport industry, with agreements between TV companies and universities regarding the start of college football games, highlights the often conflicting and competing values and interests of the various stakeholders involved in sport. These varying values and interests lead to an important challenge that managers and leaders must carefully consider in making the best and most ethical decisions. Ethical leadership must be an appropriate strategy to help thwart unethical behaviors within sport organizations. Brown and Trevino, 2006, suggested that ethical leaders are characterized as honest, caring, and principled individuals who make fair and balanced decisions. In this light, sport leaders must frequently communicate with their followers about ethics, set clear ethical standards, and use rewards and punishments to see that those standards are followed. Sport leaders must also proactively communicate, reinforce, and make decisions with consideration of the effect of those decisions on the organization and its stakeholders. People play an important role in sport organizations, and this chapter provides an overview of some of the concepts involved in the management of these people and the relevance of leadership and guiding their activities toward the achievement of organizational goals. As outlined in the chapter, management and leadership are two distinct but complementary functions. Management refers to the process of working with and through individuals and groups to accomplish organizational goals. Leadership is the process of influencing individual and group behavior for some desired result. Contemporary management theorists have cited 5 underlying functions that guide the concept of management, such as planning, staffing, organizing, directing, controlling, and evaluating. Managers in sport organization commonly use 3 basic skills: conceptual, human relationships, and technical. In this chapter, the roles of top level, middle level, and supervisory level managers are explained and connected to specific managerial skills. Conceptual skills are often exercised by top level managers when communication and planning are needed to assess the big picture within a sport organization. Human relations skills are an integral part of top level, middle, and supervisory level managers, because managers are at each level are required to interact with people daily. Finally, supervisory level managers must have specific technical skills related to their role for effective operation. For instance, the frontline manager of the concession area at the local hockey arena must have technical knowledge and skills with the cash register computing system to effectively manage subordinates. Several theories have been developed to explain leadership. This chapter briefly covers the contingency theory of leadership. It also covers leader traits and behaviors and focuses on the full range of leadership model, which is a more contemporary leadership model. The multi-level approach to leadership is also introduced, in which individual, group, and organizational level factors are introduced that affect the leadership process. As part of their responsibilities, managers and leaders are constantly involved in making decisions. Steps in decision making include defining or framing the problem, identifying criteria for the decision, developing and evaluating the alternatives, selecting an alternative, implementing the alternative, and evaluating the effectiveness of the decision. The concepts of power and authority are integral to decision making. Power is defined as the ability to influence others or as a control over resources. Organizational sources of power include legitimate reward and coercive power. Personal sources include reverent, expert, and informational power. Authority is defined as the power to enforce rules and to expect subordination from those who have no authority. Collectively, decision-making power and authority are important concepts for managers and leaders to understand and carefully wade through to achieve the goals of the sport organization. Managing diversity in organizations can be challenging, but leaders should not be deterred from ensuring that the workplace is diverse. In addition, diversity management may connect directly to ethics in the leadership of sport organizations, and that leaders are influenced by sources of ethics, including their personal moral codes, professional codes of conduct, and their organization standards, rules, and procedures. Each source contributes to the ethical outcome of a leader's decision-making process. And here are a few review questions for you. I'll leave those for you to kind of go over on your own. I look forward to talking with you again next time. Have a great day.